it is largely a European movement, this, and obviously, though the Americans checked out and now under Joe Biden they've checked back in, but how surprising was it and how much of a blow was it to global climate action to have Russia and China effectively not turn up and certainly not sign up to net zero by 2050?
Well, I think it's very significant. I mean, I think the thing that you have to remember, in the past, Russia and China would show up just as sort of public relations to sort of suggest that they were sort of on board in some way, even if just symbolically. This time, neither President Xi nor President Putin even bothered going to Glasgow. I think it shows newfound strength. It should be a very worrying sign, I think, both for Europe and the United States. China and Russia are able to go it alone. Russia, as you know, has brought a new pipeline into Europe to bring natural gas. They're very confident in their position. It's not clear whether Putin is playing games with the Europeans or not, but he's definitely has control over European energy supplies. China, meanwhile, has announced 150 new nuclear reactors. It's going to achieve its own self-sufficiency, so it's not dependent so much on oil and gas and coal imports. So this is, I think, an inflection point in terms of the potential decline of the West in its relationship to larger global concerns. It certainly underscores that nations make their own decisions on energy and food policy. They don't decide to change what they do in terms of energy from the United Nations. But I think it's a real concern when you see people like President Biden begging OPEC on the one hand to produce more oil, and on the other hand say that he's taking advice from Prince Charles, of all people, not somebody that I think should provide much reassurance of a vision of a future of the United States energy economy.
Oh, no, I don't think we should be taking advice from Prince Charles. Now, did I miss a big effort or a big focus on nuclear energy in Glasgow, or was it non-existent? Because there's a big focus in the Australian media on other countries telling Australia to get out of coal, to stop exporting our coal, but not a focus on how you can replace that baseload power. And as you know, renewable energy can't do that. If you're going to get rid of coal, you've got to find some other reliable, emissions-free energy to replace it, and nuclear is the only option at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the behavior of certainly Western government leaders towards nuclear has been completely appalling. You have to keep in mind that we now have revelations that 80% of the world's solar panels are made by Uyghur Muslims who are in concentration camps and are allowed to make solar panels as a reprieve from being in those camps. John Kerry, the climate envoy for President Biden, expressed some concern about that a few months ago, but then recently asked about it, sort of shrugged his shoulders and said that it really wasn't his concern, which is a fairly appalling attitude given that the U.S. State Department has said that there's a genocide being committed against the Uyghur Muslims. If nuclear had been on the agenda at these climate talks, Chris, it would have changed everything because, as you said, nuclear is the only scalable, reliable, and cheap way to replace fossil fuels. So the fact that the United Nations and so many Western government leaders, including European governments, have been arguing strictly for solar panels imported from China and unreliable wind energy, which has made German and Danish energy the most expensive electricity in Europe, whereas France and Sweden, which get 40% and 70% of their electricity from nuclear, some of the cheapest in the world, some of the cheapest in Europe, that should tell you that this UN climate conference isn't really about reducing carbon emissions. It's much more about trying to return Europe in some romantic fantasy and the United States to some pre-industrial past while trying to gain control over African economies, Asian economies, trying to keep them, I think, mired in poverty. It's a fairly appalling turnabout situation at a time when, again, China is going with 150 reactors over the next 15 years, which is more nuclear reactors than the entire world has built over the last 35 years. President Putin is going big on nuclear reactors at home, in part so he can sell the natural gas to Europe. So I think it's a sad day for the West. I hope it's a wake-up call for Australian government, the U.S. government, Canadian, European governments. Not sure it will be if they're taking advice from Prince Charles, rather than looking to China and Russia for how countries that are serious about their energy policies behave.
Michael, as you were speaking, we're showing some of the massive solar installations across hillsides in China, which make your point strongly about how there's a massive physical footprint for even solar power compared to nuclear. I know that's something you've spoken about before. Thanks so much for joining us. I'd like to talk to you again soon about your latest book, another topic, but hopefully we can catch up again soon.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Chris.
Michael Shellenberger there. His latest book is called San Francisco, How Progressives Ruin a City, or Why Progressives Ruin a City. We'll catch up with him on that book soon, because that's a different but fascinating topic.